Hello, one more time here. Okay, back where we left off with the head. All right. Before I forget, there's one really important thing that's really useful when you're learning ZBrush, and that is if you put your mouse on something like this and you hold down the control key, it tells you what that thing is and it gives you a little info about it. Okay? So if I want to know, what focal shift is, it tells me that. I want to know what this is. Doesn't tell me anything. Stroke, okay. Different aspects of it over here. Um, so it's a really helpful thing. I still do this because there's still things I find in ZBrush sometimes that I don't know where those came from or what it was. I've never used it before. And so it's a great idea to remember that, the control key. Okay. All right. I want to cover a few of these little guys over on the right. Okay. Uh, there are some of these you're going to use a lot and others you will never use. Okay. Uh, I'll get back to the render one in a minute. This scroll document just moves the document around. I would just keep your hands off that. Not really something that's going to be useful. This zoom document, if you think this is zooming, it's not. Okay. So if I drag on this, all it's doing is blowing up the screen, as you can see, because I have all these weird little aliased edges here. Okay. To get out of that, you can just click this actual like that. So if you wanted to zoom and actually do it over in this palette, which I suggest you don't, you can use this to drag up. Okay. And you'll see now no weird pixelization, no aliasing. That is really what you want to do. Okay. If you're trying to do that. If you're stuck inside something like this, you just hit the F key. F is in frame, like that, and that puts everything in your scene inside the window. Okay, so that's a really useful thing to remember. Okay, to know that that's there because you get stuck sometimes and you can't get out. This AA half just basically gives you a zoomed out view of the document. Again, not the actual model. Okay, the difference there. Perspective. Now this is a big deal. Watch this guy. Okay, here. I have perspective on right now. If I turn it off, look at that. Okay. So perspective, remember, is the alteration of things the closer they are to the viewer. So since his nose is closer to me than the back of his head, that's going to look, accordingly a bit larger with this. Okay. So when you're sculpting, when you're working on things, it's a great idea to click that on and off from time to time. And it's really just the P key. Okay, turns it on and off. How you want to work. Sometimes if you are, doing something like this, it's going to look different in perspective than not. So I definitely think you should have perspective on when you're getting ready to render. In other words, make a two-dimensional image from the three-dimensional model so that you can drop it into Photoshop or something else. But most of the time, when you're sculpting, you can leave it off. Okay. There's a button here called Floor. Okay, and what that does is shows you, zoom out here, a grid. Okay, and you can see the grid. It's kind of hard to see back there, but it's there. Okay, let me move him out of the way here for a second. I'll leave his teeth and eyes there. So this little blue line and the green lines and stuff, that is the X, Y, and Z axis of your scene. Okay, and you don't really need to pay too much attention to that right now. However, that will come into play later when you're dealing with shadows. You have to have the floor turned on to see shadows, or when you're trying to orient something in the middle, exact middle of the document. Okay, because that's where this stuff all happens. All right, I'll just undo that. Doop, back to get his eyes and his teeth joined at last. Okay, so floor. And this is a good example of another thing that you'll see in ZBrush quite a bit. The tiniest letters in the world, X, Y, and Z over here. Okay, I can turn the floor on in the X, the Y, and the Z axis, okay, which means I'm basically looking at kind of inside a cube. Okay, and you're going to see this a lot, okay? Because you, for certain operations, you can do it in all three dimensions, or just pick and choose which dimensions you want to affect: X or Y or Z, or two of the three, or just one of the three. Okay, so this little guy, rotate on all axes. What that means is when I drag outside the model here, like this, see he's hollow, I can drag in a circle here and I'm seeing all dimensions of him, like so. Now if I turn this off, and I basically turn it off by just clicking one of these X or this Y or Z, it's going to rotate around that axis, like so. Rotate on the Z axis, okay? So I'm getting a different way of peeling that around, all right? It's not acting exactly the way I want it to, so I'm not going to worry about it at the moment. We'll deal with it later if we need to. Frame, it's the F key, okay? Again, so you can do it over here, you can just memorize those guys. Move edited objects. So this is like this, okay? It's moving it parallel to the picture plane, okay? We would call that panning. To do that without clicking on this, you just click outside the object with the Option key held down, or the Alt key, sorry, if you're on a PC, and that will do the same thing. All right? All right. Zoom 3D, again, this is using the controller command key. Hold that down, and then use the right mouse button to drag left and right to zoom in and out on the model, okay? And again, this is not this one, this is this one, Zoom 3D, like so. So, you might have an interesting, or observe something interesting here. What if I'm so in close here that I can't move the model without actually, sculpting on it accidentally? That could be a real issue. Well, these little white areas around the document right here, those are areas that are kind of neutral in that they don't listen to the sculpting commands. So if I were to hold down Control while I'm in this area and drag out, I can get that to happen without any kind of a sculpt or mask take place. Control also deals with masking, which is why I'm bringing that up. But let's say Option. Let's say I'm zoomed way in here and I just want to move this. So Option, if I click in here and drag, it goes over this way, okay? Because remember, if I hold Option down while I'm clicking on the model, it turns on this Z sub rather than Z add, okay? So if I'm trying to do that in here, I would get an entirely different thing going on, all right? Sorry, I had black turned on there, like that, like so, okay? So again, if I have something that's really close in here, like this, and it's obscuring the background and I can't get at it, and I don't want to hit the F key, I can use these little areas over here to move my model without actually marking on it, okay? Most of the time I would just use the F key, okay? So you saw this before, this polyframe, that's Shift F, okay, and if I hold on Control, you'll see what this says. It essentially shows the edges of the polygons on the model, okay? So like this, all right? So I can see how the topology of this is working, which is how the flow of the polygons goes, okay? And I can also see the number of them, okay? I've got almost 1 million at this point, right here. Turn that off. Transparency, what this does is that it takes these subtools, which are extra objects in your scene, and it makes them transparent so that whatever you are actually looking at becomes solid, but the other objects around it are transparent. So that essentially allows you to be able to position things carefully and manipulate stuff without other things getting in the way, okay? And that's kind of pairs up with Ghost here. So, expose is something, it just pulls all your parts of your subtools and models apart, and then it puts them back together. Again, it's something you can do so you can get at something and then put it back together without actually having to physically move it yourself. so it remembers where things were. And that's a good thing. That's very handy. Okay, so that's these guys over here. The final one up here is, I'm going to get back to our head. Okay, by the way, this is the subtool menu. I will talk about this later. Okay, you don't really need to worry about it right now, but you'll be using it all the time because you can only work on one thing in ZBrush at a time. So you break things down into subtools and put them together. And anyway, that's where that lives. Up there. Okay, the last thing up here I said I'd get back to, and that's BPR, which stands for Best Preview Render. So if I turn perspective on here, and give our guy a hero pose here, like so, and let's change his material to, I don't know, what do you think? Green metallic? Sure. And click on this, you'll see it's going to drag a little box up or a line up here, and this is actually a rendered version now. Okay, so this is as good a quality as you can get from this particular model, and you'll notice right away that we have shadows now. Okay, that's the big thing you'll see that's different when you do a BPR render. Now if I move this object, the render goes away and you're back to your regular stuff. Notice the shadow goes away. You kind of have a fake shadow here that's built into the matte cap. Okay, but no normal shadow. Okay, so if I click up here again, it's going to render that. Boop, like so. Oh, I'm underneath it right now. You see this kind of weird little hazy thing? That means I'm under the floor. So I need to actually move out of here. Nope, I'm still under the floor. Okay. Here, we'll just do it like this. Here's my little symbol for the floor and stuff. All right. Let's try that one. Okay, so if I don't like that, I can just turn the floor off, I think. Yeah, okay, so there we go. So that's fine. And these shadows, you'll see are pretty heavy, and I will talk about how you can control that. The default shadow in ZBrush is this dark ray trace shadow, which is really hard edge. Looks terrible unless you're trying to be like, you know, superhero or something, or an evil genius, maybe more likely. Anyway, we're going to talk about that later. I keep saying that, but there's a lot to cover. Next one is we're going to talk about saving your files and how to keep things, you know, organized. Okay, so I will be back. Stay tuned.